It was Mother's Day. The sun streamed through the living room windows of my daughter Danielle's house in Atlanta, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. I had arrived just after church, wearing my favorite green dress, the one with the pearl buttons that always made me feel elegant. I brought fresh flowers from my small garden and a tin of sweet potato cookies for my grandkids, Elijah and Amara. "Grandma Grace," little Amara shouted, launching herself into my arms. Elijah, older and more serious at 8, followed right behind her, wrapping his arms around my waist. Their hugs filled my heart with a familiar, warm joy. For a fleeting moment, everything felt perfect. Michael, my son-in-law, barely looked up from his phone. He gave me a quick, dry nod that felt more like a dismissal than a greeting. Danielle came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. She wore a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mom, so glad you made it," she said, her voice bright but brittle. "We have a special surprise for you." I sat on the sofa, the children settling at my feet, their eyes wide with anticipation. I settled my purse next to me, my hands folding in my lap, ready to receive whatever small token they had for me. Danielle pulled a pink, glittery card from her purse and handed it to me. "It's from all of us, Mom," she said, that same strained smile fixed on her face. "Read it out loud, so everyone can hear." My hands trembled just slightly as I opened the envelope. The front of the card had little flower drawings the kids had clearly made. How sweet, I thought. My heart swelled. I cleared my throat and started to read in a clear, excited voice. "Roses are red, violets are blue." My voice cracked. The air thickened. The next words felt like punches, stealing the breath from my lungs. "You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here." I stopped. I must have read it wrong. I blinked, trying to focus on the black ink, but my eyes blurred with sudden hot tears. "Go on, Mom," Danielle urged, her voice tight with suppressed laughter. I tried to continue, my voice now a raw whisper. "Your time has passed. It's time for you to go. Signed, your family who can't stand you anymore." The silence in the room was deafening, stretching for 3 eternal, agonizing seconds. Then Michael started to laugh. It was not a small chuckle. It was a cruel, mocking laugh that echoed off the walls. Danielle covered her mouth, but I could see her shoulders shaking. She was laughing too. Even the kids, not fully understanding the words, but sensing the shift in the room, started to giggle because the adults were. "Did you see your face, Mom?" Danielle managed to get out between gasps. "You should have seen yourself. Michael, did you get a picture?" My heart, which had been so full just moments before, shattered. The pieces felt like jagged glass in my chest. The hot tears finally spilled, rolling down my wrinkled cheeks and dripping onto my green dress. The card fell from my trembling hands onto the plush carpet. "It's just a joke, Mom," Danielle said quickly, but there wasn't an ounce of remorse in her voice. "Don't take it so seriously. You've always been so dramatic." Michael walked over and picked up the card, waving it dismissively. "Yeah, Grace, we were just playing around." He paused, his expression shifting from amusement to something colder, something calculated. "But, lately you have been a bit too present. Maybe you should consider other options." "Other options?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Well, Danielle said, finally sitting in the armchair across from me, her tone suddenly practical. "There are some really good senior living communities for people your age. Places where you can be with people like you. You'd be more comfortable." The words senior living rang in my head like a death sentence. My own children, my only daughter. They wanted to get rid of me like I was a piece of old broken furniture. Elijah, my sweet grandson, looked at me with confused, worried eyes. He came over and took my hand. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Before I could answer, Danielle pulled him away. "Come here, Elijah. Grandma's fine. She's just being sentimental." I sat there, surrounded by the family I had given my life to, feeling more alone than I had ever felt. On the one day that was supposed to celebrate my motherhood, my own daughter had turned me into a cruel joke. I slowly got up, my legs shaking so hard I wasn't sure they would hold me. I should just go. "Okay, Mom," Danielle said. She didn't even stand up. "We'll call you later." I walked to the door, clutching what little dignity I had left. I could feel Michael's satisfied smirk on my back. I didn't look back at my grandchildren. I couldn't. I walked out into the bright sunshine, but inside, my world had gone completely dark. That night, my small house in Atlanta felt cavernously empty. The silence was louder than any noise I'd ever heard. I sat in my favorite armchair, the worn velvet one where I had nursed Danielle 45 years ago. The cruel, glittery pink card lay on the side table, mocking me. I cried until there were no more tears left in me. But as the hours ticked by and the moon climbed high, something else settled in its place. It was a cold, hard clarity. The humiliation had woken something up, something that had been dormant for decades. It was time for my family to learn the truth about who Grace really was. But first, I needed to remember how I had arrived at such a painful moment. I let the memories flow, playing like an old movie in my mind. It all started when I was 29. Danielle was only 3. Her father left one Tuesday morning. He simply wasn't there when we woke up. He left a note on the kitchen table, weighted down by his house key. "I can't do this life. I'm sorry." He didn't even say goodbye to his daughter. I remember holding Danielle as she cried, her little fists balled up, asking for her daddy. "Daddy had to go far away, my love," I whispered, my own heart breaking. I kissed her forehead and made a silent vow. She would never go without anything. Not ever. And I kept that promise. I worked double shifts at the textile mill for 15 years. My hands, which had once been soft, became rough and full of calluses from sewing uniforms late into the night. Every extra cent I earned, every overtime hour I took, was saved for Danielle's education. When she was 17, she came home with shining eyes, talking about nursing school. She had a dream. I looked at the tuition cost, and my heart sank. It was impossible. But then I looked at my mother's jewelry box. It was the only valuable thing I owned: a heavy gold locket, a sapphire ring, the earrings my father had given her. I sold every last piece. "Mommy, are you sure?" Danielle asked me that day, her voice thick with emotion as I handed her the enrollment check. I smiled, pushing back her hair. "My love, your education is the most important thing." I didn't hesitate for a second. During her 5 years of university, the mill wasn't enough. I took a second job cleaning offices on the weekends. I would come home long after dark, my back feeling like it was wrecked. But when I'd peek into her room and see Danielle studying at her desk, the book spread open. The pain vanished. It was all worth it. The day of her graduation, I cried with so much pride I thought my heart would burst. "We did it, Mommy," she said, hugging me tight, her face buried in my shoulder. "This wouldn't have been possible without you." I held her, smelling the perfume in her hair, and thought, my job is done. She is safe. I was so wrong. I held on to the memory of that graduation day for years. It was a perfect shining moment, the culmination of all my sacrifice. I truly believe Danielle understood what I had done for her. A year later, she met Michael. At first, I truly liked him. He was polite, worked in finance, and seemed to genuinely love her. He was tall, dressed impeccably, and had a smile that could charm a room. When he came to my house for dinner, he'd bring flowers and compliment my cooking. "You're a wonder, Grace," he'd say. I can see where Danielle gets her strength. I was happy for her. I wanted her to have the partner I never had. I wanted her to have the stable, two-parent home she deserved. When they announced their engagement, I was overjoyed. "We want a big wedding, Mom," Danielle told me, her eyes sparkling. "A really beautiful one at the Callenwold Fine Arts Center." I looked at the estimates she showed me. The cost was astronomical. I saw Michael glance at me, a quick, expectant look. "Don't worry, my love," I told her, my savings account flashing in my mind. "It's the most important day of your life. You deserve it." I gave them $12,000. It was half the cost of the wedding and a significant portion of what I had managed to save after her tuition. "Mom, this is too much," Danielle protested weakly, but she took the check. "Nonsense," I said, smiling. The wedding was beautiful. Danielle looked like a princess, and as I watched her dance with Michael, I felt that familiar surge of pride. This was her new life. About a year after the wedding, they decided to buy their first home. They found a lovely brick house in a good school district just outside Atlanta. "We're just a little short on the down payment, Mom," Danielle mentioned casually over the phone. "The banks are so strict." Michael got on the line. "Grace, we'd pay you back, of course, with interest. It's just to get our foot in the door. It's an investment for the grandkids, really." Grandkids. The word was magic. I went to my bank the next day. I pulled $25,000 from my retirement savings. It was almost everything I had left. I handed them the check at their cramped apartment. "This is a gift," I said, my voice firm. "Not alone. A family helps each other." Danielle cried and hugged me. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom. You're our angel." Seeing them move into that beautiful brick house, seeing the nursery they were painting, filled me with a deep satisfaction. I had done it. I had given my daughter the perfect, stable life I had always dreamed of for her. I thought, foolishly, that the big expenses were over. I had no idea they were just beginning. Then the grandkids arrived. First Elijah, then 2 years later, little Amara. Those children became the light of my life, the reward for every hardship I had ever endured. When Danielle's maternity leave ended, she sat me down at her kitchen table, her face etched with worry. "Mom, daycare is thousands of dollars a month. We just can't afford it with the mortgage. I might have to quit my job." "You will not," I told her firmly. "You work too hard for that nursing degree. I'll watch them." "Mom, I can't ask you to do that. It's a full-time job." "It's not a job," I insisted, taking her hand. "It's a joy." And so, for 3 years, I became their free, full-time nanny. Every morning at 6 a.m., I would walk the 6 blocks to their house. I made the kids breakfast, dressed them, took them to the park, fed them, bathed them, and read them stories. When Danielle and Michael came home from work, the house was clean, the children were happy and fed, and dinner was often simmering on the stove. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom," Danielle used to tell me in those early days, hugging me at the door. "You're an angel." I would walk home exhausted, my feet aching, but my heart was full. This was family. This is what you do for family. Then, 2 years ago, Michael lost his job. His finance company had major layoffs. He was devastated, and Danielle was frantic with worry about the mortgage. "We're going to lose the house, Mom," she cried to me over the phone. "No, you are not," I said. I went to my bank. I looked at my modest Social Security check and my small dwindling savings. I did the math. "I'm going to send you $500 a month," I told them that night. "It will be tight for me, but it will cover the gap." "Oh, Mom," Danielle whispered, relief flooding her voice. "It's just temporary, just until Michael finds something better, I promise." Michael found a new, even better job 6 months later. I remember the night they told me, We went out for a small celebration, but the next month came and I saw the $500 automatically transfer from my account. I waited for them to say, "Mom, you don't need to send the money anymore." They never said it. Another month passed, and another. The $500 just kept disappearing from my account on the first of every month, and they just kept accepting it. It was no longer a lifeline. It had become an expectation. That was when the subtle comments started, the small shifts in the air. "Mom, you don't really have the energy you used to for watching the kids, do you?" Danielle said one evening when I was slow to get up from the floor. "Grace," Michael added, "I think you got the kids' vitamins confused again. Maybe you should rest more at home." I kept going every day. I kept helping. I kept giving my all, ignoring the little barbs. I told myself they were just stressed from work, but the ingratitude, it turned out, was just the beginning. The disrespect was coming next. The small comments about my age and my confusion became more frequent. The thank yous became rare, then non-existent. I was no longer the angel who saved them. I was just there. The woman who showed up, cleaned, cooked, and paid for things. The first real humiliation happened about a year ago. It was Michael's birthday. I found out by chance when Elijah mentioned the secret party they were planning. "Why didn't you invite me?" I asked Danielle over the phone, trying to keep my voice light, trying not to sound hurt. There was a pause. "Oh, Mom, it was just a really small thing. Just the four of us and a few of Michael's work friends. We thought you'd be bored." A small thing. I told myself it must have been an oversight. But that weekend, I saw the photos on social media. Brenda, Michael's mother, had posted an entire album. There were at least 20 people, Michael's relatives whom I knew well. Brenda was there, smiling, helping to cut the cake. Everyone had been invited, except me. That night I cried in silence. I told myself I must have misunderstood. They were busy. It was a mistake. But then came Christmas. I loved Christmas. I had spent almost $3,000 on gifts, a new bicycle for Elijah, a tablet for Amara, that expensive French perfume Danielle wanted, and a new set of power tools Michael had mentioned. I arrived on Christmas Eve, my arms full of beautifully wrapped packages. The kids ran to me, excited, but Danielle quickly called them over. "Kids, put Grandma's presents under the tree with the others. We'll open them all together tomorrow." My gifts, the ones I had put so much thought and money into, got lost in the mountain of packages they had bought for themselves. When it was time to open them, no one mentioned who had given what. The kids just tore through the paper, vaguely thanking everyone. But the most painful part came afterward. I had brought a special gift just for Danielle. It was a pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother and her mother before her. It was an antique, valuable, and full of our family's history. I had saved it just for her. I handed her the small velvet box. "This was your great-grandmother's," I whispered, my heart full. Danielle opened it. She looked at the pearls, their luster glowing in the light of the Christmas tree. "Mom, it's really pretty," she said, her voice flat. She didn't even try it on. "But you know, I don't really wear a lot of jewelry. Maybe you should save it for when Amara is older." She handed the box back to me. She didn't even open the clasp to feel the weight of them. I had imagined that moment for months. I pictured how my daughter would look, wearing the same pearls that had adorned 3 generations of women in our family. She had rejected it. She had rejected me. That night, back in my empty house, I cried, hugging that little velvet box. It wasn't the monetary value that hurt. It was the total, cold indifference to something that came straight from my heart. I was beginning to realize my love and my sacrifices were worthless to her. I kept the pearl necklace. I put the box away in my dresser and I tried to forget. I kept sending the $500. I kept showing up to watch Elijah and Amara, telling myself that the children needed me, even if their parents didn't. But the final straw, the event that truly broke the illusion, came 2 months ago. I woke up one morning shivering, my body aching in a way that scared me. By noon, I had a fever of 102 degrees. It was the flu, and it hit me like a freight train. I was in bed for a week. I couldn't cook. I could barely get up to go to the bathroom. The loneliness in that house was a physical weight. On the third day, shaking, I called Danielle. My voice was a hoarse whisper. "Honey, I'm very sick. The fever won't break. Could you just bring me some soup? Or just check on me?" There was a long, heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "Oh, Mom, we're just so busy right now." Danielle's voice was impatient. "Michael has a huge project at work, and I'm on a double shift at the hospital all week. Can't you just ask a neighbor?" "But honey, I can barely walk. I haven't eaten in 2 days." "Mom, you're not a little girl anymore," she snapped. "You have to learn to take care of yourself. We can't come running every time you get a cold." "A cold?" I had a 102-degree fever, and she called it a cold. She hung up. She didn't call back that day. Or the next. She didn't call back all week. It was Mrs. Johnson, my 82-year-old neighbor from across the street, who saw that my curtains hadn't been opened. She brought me homemade chicken soup and crackers. She made sure I took my medication. A woman I had barely known showed more concern for me than my own daughter. When I finally recovered, weak and 20 pounds lighter, I returned to my routine of visiting their house. No one asked how I had been. It was as if that terrible, lonely week had never happened. But I couldn't forget it. The coldness in Danielle's voice. The casual dismissal. A few weeks later, I was at their house helping with dinner. I felt a chill and went to the patio door to close it. I froze when I heard Michael's voice. He was on the patio, talking on his phone, his back to me. "Yeah, my mother-in-law lives alone," he was saying, his voice low. "She's getting really dependent. No, she's not sick, but you know how they are at that age." My heart stopped. "Yes, we're looking at options," he continued, "looking to move her to a proper place. Somewhere that can manage her." I froze behind the glass, my hand on the door handle. My own son-in-law, my daughter's husband. They were planning to get rid of me. They were looking for a proper place to put me, like I was an old, incontinent dog. That night, I couldn't sleep. I had given my whole life, all my money, all my love to this family. And now, I was just an obstacle they wanted to move out of the way. After I overheard Michael's plan, a dreadful cold calm settled over me. I kept visiting. I kept smiling. But I was no longer Grace, the loving mother. I was a spy in my own family, watching, listening. Every smile from Danielle felt fake. Every polite word from Michael felt like a lie. Then Danielle called me, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Mom, we want you to come over on Mother's Day. We have a really special surprise just for you." My blood ran cold. A surprise. I knew exactly what this was. This was the day they were going to discuss my options. This was the ambush. Still, a foolish part of my heart hoped I was wrong. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe it was a real celebration. So I put on my best green dress, baked the cookies, and walked into the lion's den. Now, sitting in my dark living room, I relived the moment, but this time with the full, agonizing context of my sacrifices. I saw myself take the pink, glittery card. I heard Danielle say, "Read it out loud." I remembered the flower drawings and the stab of pain, knowing this was the last time their innocence would touch me. I read the words again in my mind. Roses are red, violets are blue. You're a heavy burden. No one wants you here. It wasn't a joke. It was the truth. It was how they saw me. The woman who sold her heritage for a nursing degree. The woman who gave them their home. The woman who raised their children. A burden. Your time has passed, I read again. It's time for you to go. It was Michael's voice from the patio, looking at options to move her to a proper place. This card was just a cruel, cowardly way to break the news. I looked at their laughing faces again in my memory. Michael's cruel laugh, Danielle's smirk. They weren't just being mean. They were celebrating. They were celebrating their impending freedom from me. I heard Danielle's voice. Don't be so dramatic. I heard Michael's voice. Maybe you should consider other options. And then Danielle's. There are some really good senior living communities. The scene played out again, my slow shaking walk to the door. The feeling of my world collapsing. I sat in my armchair all night, holding that card in my hands. The tears finally came, but they were different. They weren't the hot tears of a wounded mother. They were cold, bitter tears of rage. As the sun began to streak the sky, the tears stopped. The sadness had been burned away. All that was left was a core of something hard and unbreakable. Determination. They thought I was a burden. They thought I was a dramatic old woman with nothing. They thought they could throw me away. They had no idea who I really was. And they had no idea what I was about to do. The fog of my grief and misplaced love had finally cleared. The rage had left me with a sharp, piercing clarity. They called me a burden. They saw me as a poor, dependent old woman, scraping by on a meager Social Security check, a nuisance to be managed and discarded. But they didn't know something very important about me, something I had kept secret for decades, respecting the wishes of the women who came before me. I slowly got up from the armchair and walked into my bedroom. I went to the back of my closet, behind the winter coats I rarely wore in Atlanta, and pulled out an old locked wooden box. The key was small and silver, and I kept it hidden in my vanity drawer. My hand was steady as I turned the lock. Inside, beneath my own birth certificate and my long-dead husband's military papers, were the real documents. My mother, just before she passed, had gripped my hand, her voice a frail whisper. "It's in Nassau, Grace," she told me, her eyes urgent. "A small property. It's yours when you turn 70. It's been rented for decades. Don't touch the money unless you truly need to be free." I pulled out the deed, a beachfront condo in Nassau, Bahamas. A property management company had been handling it for 30 years, depositing the rent into an account I had never ever touched. And that wasn't all. My Aunt Lucille, my mother's sister who had died childless, had been a shrewd, quiet woman. She never trusted banks, but she believed in the stock market. She had left everything to me. I pulled out the investment portfolio. Bonds, stocks, certificates of deposit. Money that had been quietly, silently growing for over 20 years, compounding, waiting. I sat on the edge of my bed as the sun came up, looking at the most recent statements. In total, between the Nassau account and Aunt Lucille's investments, I had nearly $400,000. $400,000 that my family knew nothing about. They thought I was a poor old woman living on government handouts. They didn't know I had been discreetly funding their comfortable life for years, not out of need, but out of love. A love I now saw was completely one-sided. I'd been accepting their crumbs of affection while I was secretly paying for their entire lifestyle. I looked at the glittery pink card on my nightstand. The words "heavy burden" seemed to mock me. That cruel card, I whispered to the empty, quiet room, was my wake-up call. I sat there, on the edge of my bed, surrounded by papers that proved I was not the woman they thought I was. The sun was fully up, streaming into my bedroom, illuminating the cold, hard truth of my secret wealth. But I wasn't finished. Fueled by this new, cold anger, I took a pen and a notepad from my nightstand. It was time to do the other math. Not the math of my assets, but the math of their greed. I went through my old checkbook stubs and bank statements. The numbers stacked up, one betrayal at a time. $25,000. The down payment on their house? $12,000 for the wedding at Callenwold. It's just temporary, Danielle's voice echoed in my head. That $500 a month had been transferring for 2 straight years, long after Michael got his new job. That was another $12,000, $2,000 for Elijah's computer, $4,000 for Danielle's car repair, $8,000 for their kitchen remodel, the one they never invited me to eat in. I added it all up, my hand shaking, but not from weakness. It was shaking with rage. $67,000 in 5 years alone. $67,000 they had taken from me, received as if it were their natural right, all while their respect for me withered and died. I finally understood with painful, devastating clarity what my real place was in their life. I wasn't the beloved mother. I wasn't the cherished grandmother. I was the emotional ATM. When they needed money, there was Grace. When they needed a free babysitter, there was Grace. When they needed a scapegoat for their frustrations, there was Grace. But when Grace needed love, when Grace needed care, when Grace was sick with a 102-degree fever, Grace didn't exist. I closed the wooden box. The time for tears was over. The time for weakness was over. That morning, I made the hardest and easiest decision of my life. I took out my old laptop, the one I only used for emailing my church group. I blew the dust off the cover and plugged it in. I opened my online banking portal. It was time to make some important changes. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. The rage and clarity were more potent than any caffeine. I showered, the hot water washing away the last traces of the weeping, victimized woman I had been just 12 hours earlier. I went to my closet, pushing past the green dress I had worn yesterday. I pulled out my most elegant gray suit, the one I had bought for Danielle's university graduation, but had barely worn since. It was tailored, sharp, and meant business. I styled my silver hair not in its usual soft bun, but in a sleek, sophisticated chignon. I applied my makeup carefully, adding a touch of deep red lipstick. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see Grandma. I saw Grace, the woman who had built a life from nothing, the woman who owned $400,000 and a condo in paradise. My first stop was the bank. I walked in at 9 a.m. just as the doors opened. My financial advisor, Mr. Thompson, was surprised to see me. He was used to me coming in only to deposit small checks. "Mrs. Grace," he said, standing up, a look of concern on his face. "Is everything all right? You look different." "Everything is perfectly fine, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice firm without a tremor. "I need to make several important changes to my accounts." We sat in his glass-walled office. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. First, I need to permanently cancel the automatic $500 monthly transfer to Danielle's account. Mr. Thompson's eyebrows shot up. The one that's been running for 2 years? "That's the one," I said flatly. "Cancel it. Effective immediately." He typed, his expression puzzled. "Okay, canceled." "Second," I continued, "I want to close the joint savings account I opened 3 years ago for family emergencies. I want the full balance transferred to my primary checking account." Now he looked truly worried. He lowered his voice. "Mrs. Grace, that's a very significant move. Are you sure you wouldn't like to discuss this with your daughter?" I met his gaze and I did not blink. "Mr. Thompson, are you my financial advisor, or are you hers? He stammered. Yours, of course, Mrs. Grace. My apologies. Then do as I've asked, I said. It's my money, and I am closing that account. He nodded, typing quickly, his face flushed. Yes, ma'am. Closed. The funds are transferred. Thank you, I said, standing up and smoothing my suit jacket. Is that all? He asked, looking up at me, bewildered. For today, I said. It is. I walked out of the bank, the Atlanta sun feeling warm on my face. I had just taken back my power, and I was just getting started. My next stop was just 2 blocks down in a tall glass building, the law offices of Mr. Dubois. Mr. Dubois was an older gentleman, a pillar of the Atlanta community, who had handled my family's simple legal affairs for decades. He had drawn up my first will, the one that left everything to Danielle, my pride and joy. He had known me since Danielle was a child. His secretary, a young woman, looked surprised to see me. I didn't have an appointment. Mr. Dubois is in, Mrs. Grace, but he's very busy. Tell him it's an emergency, I said, my voice polite but unbreakable. I will wait. She must have heard the steel in my tone because she picked up the phone. A moment later, I was being ushered into his large wood-paneled office. Grace, Mr. Dubois said, standing up and taking off his glasses, his face etched with concern. What's wrong? Is everything okay with Danielle? Everything is perfectly fine, Walter, I said, sitting in the leather chair opposite his desk, but I am here to completely change my will. He paused, his glasses halfway to the desk. Completely? Grace, that's a very drastic change. Your current will is very clear. The one that leaves my house and all my assets to Danielle and Michael. Yes, I am aware. I leaned forward. Walter, I've had 74 years to think, and the last 5 years, in particular, have taught me everything I needed to know. I explained exactly what I wanted. My house, my accounts, my investments, the contents of my life. Everything I had previously designated for Danielle and Michael was to be liquidated upon my death. And where? He asked slowly, picking up a pen. Do you want those funds to go? To a foundation, I said, that supports abandoned seniors, people who, like me, find themselves discarded by the very families they built. Mr. Dubois stopped writing. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. Grace, this is a profound decision. Don't you think you should think about it for a few more days? Talk to your daughter? My daughter, I said. The word sharp made her feelings perfectly clear to me yesterday, on Mother's Day. What about Elijah and Amara? He asked gently. Your grandchildren. A pang went through my heart. They were innocent, but they were also being raised by wolves. You will establish a trust, I instructed, a small educational trust for each of them, but they can only access it when they turn 25. I paused, adding the most important part, and only if they have proven, independently, that they have maintained a genuine, loving relationship with me, not a relationship of obligation, not a relationship driven by their parents. Mr. Dubois looked at the notes he had taken. He let out a long, slow breath. Grace, these decisions they're almost irreversible. I know, I said. Draw up the papers, Walter. I'll be back this afternoon to sign them. I stood up, and my hand was perfectly steady. There was no shaking. There was no doubt. There was only the cold, quiet relief of justice. I walked out of Mr. Dubois' office and into the bustling Atlanta afternoon. The city sounds, the traffic, the people talking on their phones. It all seemed distant, like I was moving through a world that was no longer mine. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. It was the peace of finality. I had one more stop to make. I walked into a small travel agency tucked between a cafe and a bookstore. The agent, A young woman with bright, kind eyes smiled at me. Where are we dreaming of today? Nassau, I said, my voice clear. The Bahamas. Oh, lovely, she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. A vacation? How many are traveling? Just one, I said, and I'd like to fly out this Friday. This Friday? That's soon. Is it a tourist trip, ma'am? Round trip? I smiled, a small, genuine smile that started in my heart. No, I said. It's a one-way trip to freedom, and I'll need a one-way ticket, please. Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. One way to Nassau, and economy, premium. I thought of the calluses I'd had on my hands for 15 years. I thought of the weekends I spent cleaning offices. I thought of the $400,000 sitting in my name. First class, I said. If I'm going to start my new life, I'm going to do it in style. She booked the ticket. I paid for it without flinching. When I walked out of that agency, the ticket folder felt heavier and more valuable than any amount of money I had ever given my daughter. It was my future. I got home late that afternoon. I went to my antique desk and took out the elegant letterhead I had bought years ago, but never had an occasion to use. It was time to explain to my family exactly what had happened and exactly what they had lost. I wrote the first letter to Danielle. My dearest daughter, it began. By the time you read this, I will be on my way to Nassau, where I will live in the property I inherited from my family that you didn't know existed. I wrote the second letter to Michael. Michael, I heard your phone conversation 3 months ago when you were talking about finding a proper place to move me. I laid them both out, side by side, in stark white envelopes on my coffee table, ready to be discovered. I sat in my living room for a long time, just looking at the 2 white envelopes on the coffee table, one addressed to Danielle, one to Michael. They explained everything. The money, the Nassau property, the disinheritance. It was all there in neat, cursive letters, but something felt wrong. It felt too easy. After decades of hiding, of being silent, of swallowing their disrespect, a letter was just another way of running. It was cowardly. They didn't deserve a letter. They deserved to see my face when their world fell apart. And I, after a lifetime of their casual cruelty, deserved to see theirs. I picked up the envelopes. I walked to my kitchen shredder and fed them through, one after the other. I watched the strips of paper pile up. My liberation wouldn't be on paper. It would be in person. I picked up the phone. My hand was perfectly steady. I dialed Danielle's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice clipped and annoyed, as if my call was an interruption. Mom, what's up? I'm busy. We're about to have dinner. I'll be brief, I said. My voice was cold, devoid of the warmth, the pleading, the emotion she was so used to hearing from me. The coldness in my tone must have surprised her, because she went silent. I need you and Michael to meet me tomorrow morning, I continued. Meet you? Where? What's this about? She asked, her voice instantly suspicious. At Mr. Dubois' office, I said. 10 a.m. sharp. We need to discuss my future. There was a sudden, heavy silence on the line. I heard fumbling, and then the distinct, hollow sound of the phone being put on speaker. What did she say? I heard Michael whisper, not bothering to cover the receiver. Mom wants a meeting, Danielle replied, her voice slow, dripping with a sarcasm and victory I could feel through the line. At the lawyer's office, to discuss her future. I heard Michael let out a sharp, triumphant laugh. It's happening, he whispered, loud enough for me to hear clearly. She's finally caving. She's going to sign the papers, the senior living community. That card worked perfectly. Danielle's voice came back on the line, suddenly smooth, patronizing, and overflowing with false sympathy. Oh, Mom, of course, she said, her voice like thick, fake honey. That's a wonderful idea. We're so proud of you for being so realistic about this. We'll be there. 10 a.m.? She continued, savoring the moment. Don't you worry about a thing, Mom. We'll handle everything from here. They hung up. The line went dead. I stood in my silent living room, the receiver still in my hand. They were arrogant. They were victorious. They thought I was broken. They thought I was surrendering. They thought they were coming to Mr. Dubois' office to sign me away like a piece of old furniture. I placed the receiver back in its cradle. A cold, thin smile touched my lips. Yes, I whispered to the empty room. We will. I was at Mr. Dubois' office at 9:45 a.m. I sat in the leather chair, the same one I had sat in yesterday, my posture perfect, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I was wearing my gray suit. I felt nothing. No nerves, no fear. Just the quiet, heavy stillness of an impending storm. At 10 a.m. sharp, the door opened. Danielle and Michael walked in. They were exactly as I expected. Michael had a self-satisfied smirk on his face. Danielle was overflowing with a sick, sympathetic energy, as if I were a sick child she was about to humor. Mom, she said, her voice dripping with pity, we're so glad you're being sensible about this. She patted my hand as she sat down, and I had to resist the urge to pull it away. Michael sat next to her, placing his leather briefcase on the table. He clicked it open and pulled out a stack of glossy brochures. We brought some options, Grace, he said, spreading them out. These are top-of-the-line communities, the best. We wouldn't settle for anything less for you. I looked at the pictures of smiling, white-haired seniors playing shuffleboard. A proper place, I said, my voice quiet. Exactly, Danielle beamed. Mr. Dubois cleared his throat. He put on his heavy reading glasses and looked at them. His demeanor was not that of a family friend, but of a legal executor. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice a formal monotone. Mrs. Grace has requested this meeting to inform you, in person, of some significant changes to her estate planning. Danielle and Michael exchanged a triumphant look. This was it. The signing. Her will? Danielle said, confused. Walter, we're here to talk about Mom's care, her immediate living situation. My care, I said, my voice cutting through her condescension, is exactly what we are discussing, Danielle. Mr. Dubois picked up the top document. Please, just listen. He began to read. As of yesterday, Mrs. Grace has amended her last will and testament. The prior document is null and void. Michael leaned forward, his smile freezing. Mr. Dubois continued, his voice steady. The new will states, and I quote, all my assets, real and personal, including the property at 1245 Willow Creek, Atlanta, and all financial accounts, previously designated to my daughter, Danielle, and my son-in-law, Michael, shall be liquidated upon my death and donated in full to the Atlanta Foundation for Abandoned Seniors. The silence that followed was absolute. Michael's smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. The color drained from his face. Danielle let out a short, sharp laugh, like a bark. What? That's not funny. Mom, what is this? What have you done? Michael, recovering, pointed a finger at me. This is ridiculous. She's not competent. Walter, you know she's not. We can fight this. Danielle turned to me, her face twisting into a mask of disbelief and rage. Mom, how could you? After everything we've done for you. Done for me? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Mr. Dubois held up a hand, looking at his notes as we had planned. Furthermore, he said, let's address the immediate situation. Mrs. Grace has also, effective yesterday, terminated all financial support. This includes the $500 monthly automatic transfer, which has been permanently canceled. And, he added, looking at Michael, the joint emergency savings account, from which you were the primary withdrawer, has been closed. The funds have been returned to Mrs. Grace's sole possession. If the will was a slap, that was a body blow. This wasn't about the future. This was about now. Michael's face went from pale to a deep blotchy red. You can't do that. That money, we rely on that. We have a mortgage. The audacity, Danielle shrieked, her voice cracking into an ugly, sharp sound I had never heard before. After I gave you grandchildren. After I let you into my home. After we took care of you. That was it. I stood up. My voice was not loud, but it filled the entire room, silencing her. Let me into your home? The home I paid the $25,000 down payment for? The home with the new kitchen I paid $8,000 to remodel? The wedding I paid $12,000 for? The $500 a month for 2 years? I leaned across the desk. You called me a burden. You called me dramatic. You thought I was a poor, senile old woman you could throw away in a home so you could keep living off my money. I saw the confusion in their eyes. They didn't understand. You made one mistake, I said. You thought I was poor. You didn't know about my Aunt Lucille's investments. You didn't know about my mother's property. I delivered the final blow. What you don't know, Danielle, is that I have assets totaling nearly $400,000. Danielle's jaw dropped. Her hand flew to her mouth. Michael looked like he was going to be sick. He was doing the math. You wanted me in a proper place, Michael, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I found one. I own a beachfront condo in Nassau. That is where I will be living. My flight is on Friday. Danielle's face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. It wasn't just anger. It was the sudden, sickening realization of what she had lost. It wasn't her mother. It was the $400,000. She lunged forward. 400! Mom! You lied to us! You had all that money and you let us. You owed us that. No, Danielle, I said, picking up my purse from the floor. I just stopped paying for your lies. Danielle just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no sounds came out. The shock was so profound, it had stolen her voice. Michael was slumped in his chair, his head in his hands. The glossy brochures for the senior communities were scattered at his feet, their fake smiles mocking him. I looked at my daughter, the child I had sacrificed everything for. I saw no remorse in her eyes, only the greedy, desperate calculation of an addict who had just had her supply cut off. I have only one last thing to say to you, Danielle, I said, my voice soft now. You taught me a very painful but very valuable lesson. You teach people how to treat you by what you are willing to accept. For decades, I accepted crumbs of love because I was afraid of being alone. I accepted disrespect. I accepted being your ATM. I accepted being your burden. I walked to the door of Mr. Dubois' office. But it turns out, being alone is infinitely better than being with people who don't respect you. Good luck, Danielle. You're going to need it. I opened the door and walked out. I did not look back. I heard a single strangled cry from inside the office just before the heavy door clicked shut behind me. Mom! But I just kept walking. The scene changed. The dark wood panels of the law office dissolved, replaced by the bright, sterile light of the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. It was Friday. I walked confidently through the terminal, pulling a small, elegant rollerboard suitcase. I was still wearing my gray suit, but I had paired it with a soft silk scarf, the color of the Bahamian Sea. I was not the old woman who had shuffled, humiliated, out of her daughter's house 5 days ago. My back was straight. My head was high. I passed through the first-class security line without a wait. I made my way to the gate, the anticipation humming in my veins. The final scene. I was in my seat, 2A, a wide plush leather chair in the first-class cabin. A flight attendant, her smile genuine and warm, leaned down. "Ma'am," she said, "can I get you something to drink before we take off?" "Champagne," I said, the word feeling natural on my tongue. "Please." She returned a moment later, placing the crystal flute on the small table beside me. "Celebrating something special today, ma'am?" I looked at her, and a real genuine smile spread across my face. A smile that reached my eyes and filled them with light. "Yes," I said, "I am. I'm celebrating my new life." The plane taxied, and then with a powerful, wonderful roar, it lifted off the ground, pushing me back into the soft leather. I watched Atlanta, the city of my pain and my sacrifice, grow smaller and smaller through the window until it was just a patchwork quilt hidden by the clouds. I raised my glass of champagne. I was 74 years old. I was alone. And for the first time in my entire life, I was completely, truly, and gloriously free. The story ends here. But the journey of self-worth is still unfolding. Thank you, my dear friends, for spending this quiet time with me. If Grace's journey touched your heart, tell me where you're listening from. Give this story a rating from 0 to 10, so I can see how far our porch of stories reaches. Until next time, dear, take care of your heart, and may God's peace guide your steps.